Business Security Weekly is recorded on Mondays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. Each week, we address the challenges facing CISOs through our guest interviews, including former and active CISOs. Our news segment is focused on leadership and communication to better help security leaders translate and communicate security risks into business risks. Jason Albuquerque, Ben Carr, Tyler Robinson, and others add their expertise to the conversation. I'm Matt Alderman, and I hope you search for Business Security Weekly in your favorite podcast catcher and subscribe to download our latest content.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just busy spilling beer all over the set. Totally fine. That's a serious beer. All right, while that settles down, Security Weekly listeners can save $100 on their RSA Conference 2023 full conference pass. RSA Conference will take place April 24th through the 27th in San Francisco and on demand. To register using the discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2023. Use the code 53UCyber. Now, speaking of conferences that I will be at, because I will not be at RSA. However, I will be presenting at B-Sides Charm in Baltimore on April 29th through the 30th. I won't be presenting for 2 days straight. My talk will be somewhere in that conference. I will also be delivering the keynote at RVASec in Richmond, Virginia, June 13th through the 14th. Again, my keynote will not take up the entire conference from the 13th to the 14th, but will be, I think, on June 13th. So I hope to see many of you listeners there, as that's where I will be in conference news.
Cool.
Yes. On to the security news for this week. Do we want to start with TikTok or AI? I feel like we should start with TikTok or AI.
TikTok.
You want to start with TikTok?
AI is much too big of a topic.
Okay, let's start with TikTok. Sam, you had one of your stories was about TikTok.
Oh, yeah. This is, they had this congressional testimony where the chief executive officers of TikTok tried to say that China would not influence his company. And, of course, that's impossible. And they had the good quotes here. It's not uncommon for Chinese authorities to forcibly disappear business executives. We've heard about this quite a lot over the last few years. Jack Ma vanished for 3 months, and They stopped his IPO. In America, we have this weird situation where an oligarch like Elon Musk is so powerful, he can affect international relations and everything. He's as powerful. One man is as powerful as a whole nation. And China is not willing to let that happen. So when a company starts getting powerful, they just crush it.
Well, you know what's funny? We joked earlier that we said Elon's going to buy Venezuela.
Yeah.
And turn it into a third world country where Elon is the dictator. And I was like, didn't he do that with Twitter?
Yeah, that's essentially what he's done with Twitter, and he could do it again. And we have we have that's what I say. My life, for example, is a comic book more like than any other kind of fiction. We have like supervillains as powerful as a whole nation, like Dr. Doom. And so anyway, it's pretty harsh what happens to people in China.
But the gist of that is TikTok was trying to say that we're not under the influence of the Chinese government.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
which is impossible.
That's totally. I mean, that's something that a Chinese company would say, but it's totally not true. Completely, I think what I'm gleaning from what you're saying, and I agree with you, Sam, is totally not true. But now, what's interesting about the whole TikTok thing, as we've seen this unfold, I think something that is like missing from the conversation, because there's been a lot of technology people, a lot of cybersecurity people weighing in on the whole TikTok. Should it be banned? Should it not be banned? Ever since it was proposed to be banned during the Trump administration. And I think that even I was listening to some other security podcasts talking about it, that it will remain nameless, in criticizing what cybersecurity people are saying about the TikTok ban. I have this to say, that I think what is missing from this conversation is that this whole situation has nothing to do with technology. It has nothing to do with privacy and everything to do with politics.
Yes.
I think Huawei and TikTok fall into this category where maybe not nothing, very little to do with technology, security, and or privacy, and everything to do with politics. We're just looking at ways to poke the finger in the eye at China. They're poking the finger back at us. And it's essentially like Cold War version 2.0 is really all it is.
I don't even know if it's that deep, though, because, I mean, to me, it's like there's sort of three things there. There's we don't know what to do about technology because, most of the people.
So therefore, ban it.
People sitting on that committee were saying things like, "Sir, does this have Wi-Fi? Mm-hmm. Is it attached to the interweb?" And you're going, okay, this guy doesn't even know. I mean, they don't even know what it is. So they've just picked this out to be the supervillain so that they can distract everybody from the real problems that they don't know how to solve. Because, if they let people think about it too long, people start going, why don't we quit buying stuff from China? And then, that's an international incident. So they like you to focus on something, and they love it if it's something very basic, like communies. That was the old thing.
TikTok is violating your privacy.
Yeah.
And you vote for me and you care about privacy. So therefore, I want to ban TikTok because it violates your privacy. And your political group is going rah, rah, rah.
It's an old political tactic, which is called invent a problem, and then solve the problem, and then brag about how you solved the problem that you invented.
To your base, and hopefully it expands your base. And if it's got other people that care about privacy, they made it in your base, maybe they're in your base now, because I care about privacy.
It's got a cute name like TikTok, and all the kids are doing it. It's a great thing to talk about.
Save the children.
Save those. Oh my God! Think of the children.
Well,
and yet we still have social media apps and alphabet agencies that leverage all of these apps and data brokers and collection and our privacy for U.S. companies. But
but hold on now. The devil's advocate to what you're saying, Tom. I'm going to tell you, independent of this conversation, I agree with what you're saying. However, people who have played the devil's advocate on other security podcasts have said, well, Google's not a Chinese company, they're a U.S. company. And therefore that invalidates your argument.
I don't disagree completely with that, because you do have to realize your threat vector and
context.
Who controls which agency or who has influence inside of that agency and or company. So I would agree with that, but not to the extent of that, because if you're a government, you are purchasing and or acquiring this data from those U.S. entities, and you still have access. So, like, privacy's dead. We should get past that.
Yep.
Move on. Like, legislation is not going to fix privacy.
No.
We can start to solve some of that with maybe some technology and being better citizens and requiring things out of vendors. But again, we're talking about 1% of 1% of the people in the U.S., and the consumer's not going to do that. So as security practitioners, we really have to start getting real with what the actual problem is and the conversation that we can affect. We can't fix this because the consumer's not going to throw up in arms and stop using all these social media platforms. So
hold on. I want to.
Now, wait a minute.
First, hold on. Before I go to Sam, I just want to say, Tyler, you made me think of Keeping It Real, the Dave Chappelle skit, which is hilarious. I want to welcome Lee Neely to the show. Lee, welcome.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. This seems to be the All Bite Dance podcast.
Yes. We're fired up already. Okay, now I want to go to Sam. Thank you, Sam, for waiting.
Now, this ties into my Article 13, which someone told me to put in here, and quite correct. See, right now the government doesn't have the legal ability in law to stop TikTok, so they want to pass this Restrict Act, which would give the government the power to ban TikTok, very much like the Patriot Act gave them power to do things they couldn't do before. And people are all up in arms about that, saying this would affect other things like VPNs and probably give the government a bunch of power we don't want them to have.
Well, now hold on. Yeah. The Patriot Act gave him hold on. The Patriot Act gave him permission to spy.
That's right.
This act would give him permission to ban stuff. I mean,
that's right.
I think in both cases it crosses a line, Sam, and I'm there with you. Two different things, but I think in both cases it crosses a line, man, that the government shouldn't be crossing.
Well, that's what people say, and an alternative, I think, which would please me a lot better, is to actually pass privacy legislation like the GDPR.
I agree.
That would affect American companies and TikTok.
No, you're right.
Please.
However, this would not affect, of course, the real problem with TikTok, which I think is not really privacy. It is the fact that it could be used as propaganda by the Chinese government.
Yep.
So realistically, I think the only way this ends is TikTok gets spun and sold to some American company.
I kind of like what the French did.
Some American company has to clone it. Yeah, go ahead.
The French actually banned all recreational apps from government devices.
Well, sure, we've already done that
here. We've already done that here, and we don't have cognac or champagne. So I mean,
we say we did that, but then why are we talking about TikTok?
Because kids are using it.
Because they want to go beyond the government ban, Doug.
Yeah, but that's just
the ban isn't just TikTok.
Well, it won't be if they pass that Restrict Act. It'll be whatever they don't like.
No, it'll be whatever their base, whatever their supporters want will be what they put.
You're no longer allowed to look at statues of David because it's pornographic.
Oh my God.
Well, yeah.
I can't.
So, I mean, the smoking gun is the tracking pixels that ByteDance has all over the place that they're reporting up to the communists. That's that they're using. So they're not. They're going to target ByteDance and any of ByteDance affiliates. They're not. They're going to. You'll probably see the TikTok fade to the background. I think it's in scope for the government to say this is inappropriate for a government device. It's harder to say.
Everyone does everyone does pixel tracking though. That's fair game.
I know. I'm just saying that. I think it's totally cool for them to say this is not appropriate for government systems, and so it shouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. That's in their scope.
That's fine.
When it comes to the private
their
sector,
choice on their systems.
Correct.
Yeah, good administration. That's what we need to be doing. We need to be doing good security on government systems. Okay, that's fine. Like we have given them purview and their ownership to those systems for procurement, their budgets. That's great.
I want them to pass something
and say, share your reasoning. Why aren't you okay? And make it available so that companies can and people can make their own informed decisions. I mean, okay, don't.
Yeah, I want them to pass something so they have to. Google has to tell me when they're tracking me, and they have to not do it like GDPR, and there's a penalty if they do, and let me decide. And then I want to use it, I can use it.
Look, if you really don't like TikTok, here's how you get rid of it. You go to Google and Apple, and you convince them that TikTok is violating their standards, and they should boot it out of their stores. Then it's gone. But as we stand today, Google and Apple are like, they're in compliance with all of our standards and guidelines. Therefore, they can exist in our ecosystems, and it's totally fine. Now, I don't want to open up Pandora's box, but I don't know who's convincing Google and Apple that TikTok is a great thing.
I just don't.
There has to be some kind of monetary value, and you're not going to get one or the other. Like, you're not going to get Google to go, it's not in the Android store anymore because it's going to be in the Apple store. You got to get both. To ban.
Yeah, look at Fortnite. That didn't work well for them.
No.
But
here's the deal. If you want to get rid of, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tyler.
I was going to say, here's the next question, though. All right, so really, we're not talking about spying. That the level of telemetry they're getting from these apps, they can do some big data analysis. They can provide some things. What we're really talking about here is influence, right? Their ability to sway ads, push those ads and propagation pieces up for propaganda, whether it is or is not, in order to get elections and have control over the mass media. They uptick certain videos. They have certain values that they're trying to put in certain areas in order to cause dissemination, whatever it is. They have the ability to influence the public, right? So the question is that public going to be influenced anyway? And so does it actually matter that we allow someone to serve up content that sways general population ideas based on how their opinion is going to go one way or another?
Stop for a second, because this is a fascinating point. The whole theme of Facebook, which was native domestic social media, was hyper-local advertising, so they could make money on ads, right? And they did that by creating echo chambers all over the bloody internet, all over their bloody page. And so that they influenced people by feeding them what they already wanted to see. So if you read conservative stories, all you were going to see was conservative stuff. And if you looked at liberal stuff, all you're going to see was liberal stuff. And if all you looked at was guns, all you're going to see, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So they separated us into these little tiny echo chambers. And then they were able to advertise to 20 people, 50 people, 100 people at a time and get incredibly targeted advertising going. And now you're bitching at TikTok because they're doing roughly similar things. And I'm not saying you are, Tyler. Please forgive me. But I'm saying, effectively, we did it to ourselves, and now you're bitching at TikTok for doing it better.
I'm just curious. Does it matter? I mean, maybe it matters when we're talking about a swing state, and we've got these very undecided sects that you're trying to swing in one way or another. Okay, I can see how, there were propaganda machines for Russia that were doing this during the elections. Like,
I don't know though.
clear.
I don't know in the U.S. you find those undecided folks now though.
No, they're there.
They are there, but maybe not as much as before.
Yeah. So again, does it matter if we're allowing people's opinions to be given the information that they're wanting to look at?
But I don't think TikTok has the reach to really make a difference. I think TikTok you're talking about. No, I think you're talking about 150-ish million users compared to Facebook, which is over 1 billion, right?
So directly TikTok does not. What they do have is the ability to gain that telemetry for the propagation of the advertising to the other platforms. So they'll utilize that big data in the analysis in order to find the demographic that they're trying to target for a particular campaign in order to do misattribution or misinformation or serve up, a popular view. So they're providing that through the other platforms. They're just getting the data from TikTok.
Gotcha.
150
One of the
million
things we're
Americans
talking
is
about
enough.
AI.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sam. I'm sorry.
I mean, with 150 million Americans, you could totally change things. I mean, the last election was decided by 70,000 votes. That's plenty.
Yeah, but
You're
I
right.
guess maybe I'm in
matter?
the minority. I don't look at TikTok as that serious of swaying my opinion.
Well, I have an odd take on the point you're making about social media with using freedom of speech to sway people's opinion. It's kind of like annoying if China or Russia are better at it than we are. But that's just sour grapes. I mean, it's how the systems work. We get freedom of speech, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
no, we do.
we're
Thankfully, we do.
We're wasting Congress. We're wasting bill apparition rights. We're wasting the time on something that is like so media frenzy that, again, does it really matter? No, we should honestly be looking at like how we're procuring this hardware and software and S-bombs and leveraging things that are going into government and cloud providers and providing small businesses.
But Tyler, should we be looking at how AI is evolving and encouraging folks to take a 6-month break from development of AI technologies, which is what the most recent Elon Musk, Steve Wozniak, and others signed a petition that, and I believe it was limited to anything more advanced than GPT-4 should take a 6-month break. Now,
yeah, exactly.
They're probably just trying to stall people while they make the next level.
But hold on. So the letter. So you're going to go read the actual letter. Don't read the crap that's written about the letter. This is the whole mantra of Paul Security Week. I think one of our mantras, right? It's like, go read the actual facts. In this case, go read the actual letter, which came from an organization that was created for this purpose that the name escapes me. Reads the letter, futureoflife.org /open letter, Paul's giant AI experiments. And you can find the link in the article that Doug links to in his story number 2. In that letter, they state, or they ask questions, I should say, should we automate away all the jobs, including the fulfilling ones? Should we develop non-human minds that might eventually outnumber, outsmart, obsolete, and replace us? Should we risk loss of control of our civilization? I think we're not even close to this.
No.
I think Ex Machina was just a movie. And you should watch that movie.
Good movie.
Especially now. I think I might go back and watch it again. They also proposed that 6-month stoppage. And we're like, what is 6 months going to do?
It's going to do nothing.
Like, what is 6 months going to do? It's going to do nothing. AI is already advancing. Now, it's not as advanced as they state. Like, basically, like, loss of control of our civilization. I think we're a long way from Skynet, The Matrix, a lot of other science fiction movies that I'm missing in that conversation.
Elon's working on the implant so he can plug it into you directly.
You have to go watch the Amazon TV show called The Feed if you want to think about what an implant would look like and the negative repercussions that would have on our society, which is what Elon is worried about. And I don't necessarily disagree with Elon in his take on AI that we should like slow our roll and like make sure we got it figured out. But I just don't agree with the 6-month stoppage aspect. Because I don't think that's going to have any effect. I think that's
It's going to have no effect at all.
That's like we're banning plastic straws. Like that.
And you'd think these Uber
that has no effect on
I mean, he's an Uber.
All right,
capitalist.
research the science behind plastic straws. You're going to find that like banning those has zero effect on our environment. And I love the environment. I love the outdoors. I love fishing and hunting, and I'm all for the environment. I just don't think that banning plastic straws has any impact, negative or positive, on our environment. Much like banning development of AI for 6 months is not going to have any impact on its development or
And how are you going to do it? I mean,
yeah. How are you going to make sure? Like,
stop.
hey,
You're
wait.
asking the wrong questions.
All right. But his idea is during those 6 months, you will write
Why?
the rules.
Okay, write the
But
rule.
still, that's the wrong question, Sam. Wait.
What's the right question?
Why is it 6 months? Why do they want to stop? Ostensibly,
Does that get us past an
overtly, bing. Okay. Overtly, it's so we can write the rules. Realistically, it's so that we can get past an election, so they can get their names out there crusading against AI taking over our world. Okay? They can gin up another boogeyman. Okay? Seriously, strong AI is not 6 months away. Strong AI is not 6 years away. Strong AI, Lee, how big are the supercomputers that are at the various federal facilities?
Oh, they're incredibly large, and now we're starting to see the starting of some quantum core processing. But we're talking, teraflops here. We got huge power sitting there.
Okay, so
and by the way,
bigger,
if you got money, you can buy it in the cloud.
Right, but they're bigger than any reasonable AI system is going to be now.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
And the large language model is just a programming thing. It's not actually simulating a neural system. It is autocomplete on steroids, and there's aspects of a neural system in there. Yes, agreed, but it's not a full neural system. In 6 months, we are not going to use one of those supercomputers and wake up a being. Okay? Someday we may. That would be fantastic, in my opinion, as long as we can get it not to be Skynet and instead get it to be our friend. But the
thing is the artificial intelligence doesn't know the difference, Josh. And if we go to a different example, look at Data on Star Trek. There are some times where he was like your best friend, and there were other times where he was murdering everyone. And that's the problem with AI.
That was his brother Lore, but anyway.
Yes, that was his brother. Yeah, then he was the evil twin brother.
You put rules around this. Again, like we look at legislation, we look at people putting rules, we adopt all this constructive forms that we have to constrain to. Like people just break rules. People don't follow that. AI gets out of that. Look at all the ChatGPT stuff. Like if you've used ChatGPT, this damn thing's not taking over the world. In fact, it's not even taking over my ability to write an email because it's not that good. We've got a long time before that happens. But its ability to be evil is there. However, we shouldn't put rules in place to fix this. It's not going to fix it. That's just going to cause the bad people to use it. It's like the gun argument. Bad people are going to do what they're going to do with this, and they're going to continue doing it. So we have to be evolving and putting our own protections and coming up with ways to utilize it for good and or protection to combat the exact same thing the evil people are doing. This is the same cat and mouse.
No. What you're talking about is Age of Ultron. That's what you're talking about. It's Ultron, man.
God.
Marvelous.
Just remember, in Multiverse of Madness, they were our friends.
Right?
Oh, dear.
Depends on which multiverse you're in. Now we're getting way off the sci-fi rails, but...
That was the Illuminati one. They were our friends. The Ultron, those robots were the Ultron robots. They actually worked.
Right. They actually, in some universe they actually worked and didn't turn. They didn't turn on us. Is that iRobot?
Yeah, I really think
we've got a lot of science fiction to pull from to have as
Cybermen. I will inject Cybermen.
Cybermen?
Has a lot of
Cybermen. They were they were a villain in Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
They were like they always turn people into Cybermen, and then they control them.
You will submit to upgrade.
That's a Dalek right there. You got a Dalek voice for a Cyberman.
This is the Cybermen.
Exterminate.
Yeah.
There are no robots in Doctor Who because it was originally funded as a educational science program, and they thought robots were not realistic.
Fascinating.
I think we're well past that. GPT-4 has a ton of capability. It is pushing the limits of a few things, but again, and to be honest, it is a little bit scary when they've adapted these plugins in alpha. Now you can get into where you're integrating things like YouTube and up-to-date data. You're not relying on 2021 data sets from GPT-3. So all the plugins and integrations and pieces where we're now accessing SaaS systems and maybe proprietary data or private data in databases, like that's when it starts to get scary. Now we're talking about vulnerabilities, and we're talking about a bot of some kind and code that's making decisions that may not be the right decisions, and who's going to audit all of those decisions in the back end. That's very complex code. Not many data scientists even have the mathematical capabilities to look at and evaluate all the decisions being made at the speed at which we're doing it and integrating things. So I think we do need to slow down and think about how
Tyler, never tell me the odds. Okay. I'm sorry. I just had to throw the Star Wars analogy in there as well. I felt like we weren't complete until we had the Star Wars analogy.
No. The whole thing is that there's a reason why they're saying 6 months. There's a reason why they're saying stop. Is it the reason that is ostensibly being put out there? And I don't believe it is. Some fragment of it, but I don't. The whole reason is what they're giving us. I believe that the reason is that they're trying to delay something or show off how awesome they are or how powerful they are.
Or,
I believe
or
some of the
stall until they get their AI to market.
Yes.
And that's the other thing is they're going to get their AI to market, because if you think that the GPT-4 is not capable of writing ransomware code, I got news for you. It's writing ransomware code every day.
But
it's writing phishing emails every day.
Can it calculate the jump to hyperspace?
I can do the Kessel run in 12 parsecs.
All right.
Wow.
I want to talk about turning traffic lights green with the Flipper Zero. Now, one reason I want to cover this story is because all of us are hackers, right? On the show and listening. In some capacity, we're hackers. And I think that as hackers, we all collectively agree that pulling off really cool hacks gives us this really like dopamine kind of rush. I think that's one reason why we do it. And if we could hack something that while we're driving turns all those traffic lights to green, like I think it's this thing where like people all have their powers and we're total nerds, and like our nerd power is like when I drive down the street, all the traffic lights turn to green. Like that would be an amazing hack. Now, do that with your Flipper Zero. Sounds very sensational, and it should, because it is, because it's not just a Flipper Zero. That when you go through this tutorial, you realize there's a lot of other hardware that's involved, and it is not necessarily interfacing with the traffic light system directly, which I've heard kind of like folklore, but folklore that I think is true, that there are hackers that have definitely, and not just in the movie hackers, actual hackers have interfaced with the traffic light system directly. However, in this particular case, there is a system, and I forget what it's in the article and what it's called, but there is what is it called?
MIRT.
MIRT. MIRT.
Not new.
Right, not new. It's basically an infrared transmitter receiver system that was set up for emergency vehicles. So the emergency vehicle essentially would have the transmitter, the traffic light would have the receiver. If you were an emergency vehicle, which is astonishing when all of us hackers read this and go like, well, what prevents anyone from transmitting on this frequency and doing it themselves? But would have a transmitter on your police car, fire truck, rescue. They would transmit and be able to turn the lights green. Now, I have to say, practically speaking, that's a thing that affects public health and safety, right? I mean, it's two things. If I'm the one in the ambulance, I want you to get to the hospital as fast as you can, and I don't want you to crash, and I don't want other people to get hurt. So I understand the goal of this system. However, And I don't know. I can't attest to whether this is actually true. I don't know if other people can. Like,
It is.
have you tried? Like, this is an actual thing. Like, if you set your mind to it, you could affect the MERT system and be able to turn traffic lights green. You've done this in your town, is what you're saying, Tyler.
Yeah. So we did this back in the night. We used to put IR filters over a strobe light you got from Radio Shack, and you would record the ambulances as they would go by, so you could get the frequency, and you would match and dial and synchronize your strobe light to the proper time.
Because what you're talking about is earlier systems that was a receiver that would actually just look for flashing lights. And the problem with that is it couldn't differentiate between a police car or a fire truck or an ambulance or anyone else that had a flashing light on the top of their vehicle and would turn the light green.
No, it was infrared. It was a strobe. So it was infrared strobe, and you had to but you have to match the frequency to the receiver. And the cars and whatever tech was being used in that town had a different frequency. This one is Opticon, and so they just found the frequency for infrared light that particular system was using, and it's doing the same thing. Those haven't changed in 20 years. We were doing the exact same thing 20 years ago with infrared strobe lights.
His setup was pretty cool, though.
It was pretty cool. It's a little bit smaller than what we did, but honestly, like, very sensationalized. Like, there is some really, really cool projects being done on Flipper Zero for sub-gigahertz stuff that deserves way more publicity and mentioning. So this is fun. But
and as we talk about the Flipper Zero, I want to make sure that as this gets in the hands of people that haven't been around the block, as a lot of us folks have been, and haven't benefited from going to conferences, being part of the community, and hopefully having some of us that have been in the community, I'm saying us old folks, have been in the community to go, make sure you use it responsibly, make sure that you have permission, make sure you're not destroying things. I find that the Flipper Zero gets in the hands of people like, wow, this is a really cool device. Like, I can just go wreck shit with this. I'm like, no, dude. Like, don't wreck stuff with that. I'm like, you need to, like, leave things as you found it. So like that hacker ethos that we all have, because we've been doing it for so long. Maybe we didn't in the beginning, but we learned it, and we instill that hopefully on new folks coming in the field. Tyler, as you know, people are gonna get the Flipper Zero and they're like out of control. I'm like, whoa, like, slow down, dude. Like, you can't just go like hacking everything without getting in trouble. Like, that's not cool. It's not cool.
Says the man who opened the Tesla gas port on how many cars?
Well, it's really just one, because there's one in my neighborhood and it's the same one, and I just never mind.
There's no gas port on the Tesla.
It's not a gas port. It is. But apparently, what I've learned recently is there are different model Teslas as it progressed over time. Earlier ones, it's just a spring-loaded thing, and it just pops open. You manually have to close the charging port. On newer models, there's a servo, right, that can open and close. So if it opens after a certain amount of time, the car goes, oh, like, I need to close that. Like, Dave, I need to close the charging port, kind of thing.
I need to close the pod bay doors, Dave.
Yes, it closes the pod bay doors. Yes. One of my other neighbors messaged me and was like, hey, I got this Flipper Zero thing. I'm like, oh, dude. Like, our other neighbor, like a Tesla port, you see that open? I'm like, totally not me. He's just laughing.
Oh my God.
He's like, no. I'm like, yeah, way. So, and then I saw this article, but yeah, a lot of cool stuff on the Flipper Zero. Apparently this month there were some available directly, and then it went.
Yeah, they're not available. Then they got banned in Brazil.
They did.
They started seizing them. So you'll have to go to Hong Kong to get them.
Or just pay more on Amazon, or you could do that. Tyler, my story number 2, disabling AV with process suspension. Have you looked into process suspension as a way to bypass AV or EDR? Is this new? Not so new? Different?
Not new.
Not new?
Mm-mm. No, you're talking about the protected process light, PPL.
Yeah, PPL. Yep.
In Windows. Yep. Yeah, this is not new, and there's several projects that have done this, and kits that do this. In fact, I believe Brute Ratel did a bunch of stuff on live process targeting for this. So essentially, you're able to pause and suspend a process with limited user privileges. There's a shutdown and stream deployment PPL right, I believe, that users get that allow this to happen. And by doing that,
it sounded like too that like AV and EDR protect from the in Linux, Unix, right? The signal that the process received. I'm assuming it's pretty similar in Windows. That goes terminate, like the kill command.
Yep.
Sends a signal to that process to say kill. Most AV EDR solutions ignore that. They're like, no, I'm not. And you could totally code that in, right? Because it's just a system callback that's like, I'm just going to ignore that. But many of the EDR solutions on Windows don't ignore the suspend, which in Linux is just a different process signal, right? I forget what it is, but I think the same thing exists now that I think about it. The same thing exists in Linux.
Process, yeah.
You can suspend, but kill and suspend is like Control Z is suspend, and that's really just sending I forget what the process signal. The signal is the halt signal to the process to suspend it. Oh, so that's the same thing in Windows. So EDRs don't filter that out, and they will totally suspend the process.
Yep. I mean, you can basically suspend the process, get your code to execute in the memory space, and then protect your memory space. The shutdown process is a PPL exclusive, but suspend, for whatever reason, is by design. That is kind of how it's designed to be used, so that there's interoperability between the processes and kernel calls. So,
but suspend in this case means it halts all operations. Not just running the background. Like Control Z means running the background. There's also like a halt operation, like still run but don't do anything, basically.
Not necessarily halt. It suspends. Yeah, you basically are putting your timer to 0, right, and holding that memory space and holding all inter-process communication without terminating, and then you can just grant the resume on it.
You're stopping the program counter.
Right. That's awesome.
Wherever it is.
But it looks like it's still there, right? I mean, that's
correct.
That's
it's
so
still
when
running.
something's checking,
it's still loaded. It's still ready to go.
It's still sitting there. It's still hooked into memory. So if something looks for it, it is there. It's just not actually doing anything. So you could do something else, and depending on how stuff was coded, it may or may not detect what you're doing, and it may think everything's fine because that's still sitting there in memory. It hasn't been stopped.
And if it's doing anything that, like it's doing a process check before something launches, that will probably have to time out, so it becomes fairly visible because it'll be long delays doing anything on the system. Because they have to time out.
You suspend a Defender. Defender's integrated into the kernel through PPL and has hooks with inside of Explorer even. So you're gonna cause some hang up issues. However, they anticipated that, and there's some interesting BOF rights for Cobalt Strike that allows you to deal with that and do very quick mini dumps in order to do the next kind of your malicious activity and then unsuspend without causing too much issue. So there's some pretty cool stuff you can do with it.
Another thing in Windows is test signing mode, which is a boot configuration option.
This is what you sent me earlier.
Yeah. So this is the one, if you got little ones in the car and stuff like that, we're just warning you, we're going to use the F word, but only because that's what the GitHub project is called in there. And this GitHub project is called TS Fucker, and it is speaking to a mode in Windows that I didn't know existed, largely because I'm a Linux person, and like by default drivers really aren't signed. I mean, they're certainly part of Secure Boot, but that's a different process from like the Windows signing of a driver. And test signing mode in Windows is what the description says, boot configuration option in Windows that allows users to load and execute drivers and system files that have not been digitally signed by Microsoft. And I also feel like that's like a GPO option too. Like you can configure your system on purpose to be able to load drivers that are not signed. but most
a bad idea.
they shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. But
I need to.
this is flipping this is code in a GitHub repo that is flipping your system into a Windows system into a mode in real time that would then subsequently allow an attacker to load drivers that haven't been signed, which means now where my brain goes, load a driver that gives me access to the spy flash and takes advantage of any writing capabilities that I can do to embed myself in UEFI, potentially. Now, Tyler, I sent it to you earlier. Is like, have you seen this before? Like, this is kind of neat.
No, I've not, and I am very curious if this is default. This has to be tied to certain versions of Windows builds, I'm sure, because it does say that it pulls in a symbols file that loads a vulnerable driver, which tells me that that driver was probably revoked and or certain system build for the mapping, because they're using OSR loader tool in order to map that driver load. I'm assuming that driver's probably been revoked, but they found a way around that. And again, I'm not sure if this is actually default and the default functionality of Windows. This isn't a very old repo. It's only 4 days old. So I was a little preoccupied with the 3CX supply chain issue going on right now. So I haven't had time to test this in the lab, but this will be next on the list.
It's awesome. Where do we want to go next? We talked about firmware encryption in the previous segment with Philippe, which was awesome. While we're on the kind of similar to drivers and revocation lists, my story number 22, what I thought was interesting was, this hits home. So this is ESET researchers published a tweet. They kind of made this realization that so Mickey and Jesse's talk at DEF CON that found there were vulnerabilities in bootloaders that were made for Windows that had vulnerabilities that were then added to the revocation list weren't really, it was like pseudo revocation in that particular case, weren't really added to the revocation list, basically like due to I would call a clerical error, for lack of a better term. Is that a fair assessment?
Clerical error, I like that. Yeah, that's about right.
So the clerical error is that, as ESET says, the problem was that for these two affected binaries, the two bootloaders, CVE 2022-34302 and 34301, the flat file hashes were added to the DBX update instead of their PE authenticode hashes.
Huh?
And then you have to go read how Windows authenticode hashes is a Microsoft thing.
Microsoft signing tool.
It's a Microsoft signing tool, but it's not just a hash of the file. It's also like the validating the cert that signed it in addition to the timestamp or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's a code signing cert essentially with validation.
Which makes sense because when I interviewed Vincent Zimmer, Vince talked about how it was basically Microsoft technology that was validating their software in their operating system that they took and adapted to become secure. So like it basically took what Microsoft was doing from the kernel forward in the boot and initialization process and in validation process, and they put that before the kernel. It was so secure boot is an adaptation of Microsoft technology, which I never realized. And so my coworker's like, well, yeah, like of course it was. I was like, I never knew that. I'm like, that's really kind of interesting. But like authentic code, when I was reading the description of what authentic code was, I'm like, oh, that sounds like it's very intertwined with like secure boot and stuff, and that all makes sense. So that was an oops.
Yeah, there's quite a bit there to dive in on.
It's just secure boot's just like a never-ending saga of interesting things to talk about. Like
I'm gonna have ChatGPT make a simple to understand secure boot training module with pretty colored drawings in crayon using Wally.
Not possible. There's too many there's a lot of links in the root of trust.
It depends.
And there's a lot of it depends, and there's like key hierarchies. And just when I think I understand it, I'll be at work, and there's a scenario that's presented. I'm like, wait, how does secure boot work or not work in that particular scenario? I'm like, wait, I thought I understood this, and I really don't.
Yeah.
You need an Elon Musk brand neural link, which then you'll be able to understand.
Well,
Pretty
just
quick.
so make sure that Tyler's training is all presented by Clippy. It'll be fine.
I feel like when you open up Chat GPT, there's like Clippy sitting there, like sending all the messages.
Well, Microsoft's integration to M365 and Office products now with the OpenAI integration is pretty big, and it's actually doing some really cool stuff that will, with Microsoft Flow being released in preview this week, integrating all of that into Flow as well. Like that side of it, I think is really cool. It is Clippy on steroids, and I love it. Like that, yeah. I can see. And
I think Clippy on steroids. I see Clippy like pumping iron, like shooting steroids into it, and then like pumping iron. It's very bizarre. Maybe it's just me. In any case, moving on to the next story.
The next story is Clippy porn.
Clippy. Hold on. No. Sam had a great story. Your story number 2. North Dakota is passed legislation that is requiring the teaching of computer science and cybersecurity into school coursework from kindergarten through 12th grade. What's ironic about this, Sam, is last night I went to my 2 younger sons' school. They're both in elementary school, and they were having the ice cream social. They had a book fair. They had games for the kids. So we went there, and I'm walking around the book fair, and I was like, I want to see like what books are available to kids. And there's books about sharks, books about comic books, books about gaming, books on all sorts of topics that it's not just like math and science. Like it's again like sharks and like cool stories and stuff. But I'm looking around, I'm like, there's not one damn book in this place about computer science or computer security or anything computer related. Now, I didn't do an exhaustive study, but like it was kind of arranged by topic, and I'm like, there's no like computer section in here. Like this is not a book fair for me. Like what is going on? I'm like, this is not a book fair that I think the kids should be. They should be exposed to something of computer science related in elementary school. And now here's North Dakota saying now it's a requirement you have to do that. I'm like,
yeah.
I see legislation that's banning plastic straws, which is ridiculous. But then I see this legislation, which I'm like, this is awesome. This actually makes us better as a society.
Just be careful though, because I worked on a project like this, and I saw a similar rule.
You had a very skeptical look on your face when you were.
Well, I saw this rule being passed.
Highly skeptical.
And well, I was like you. I initially had this like jolt of idealism. I was like, yay. Because this rule said that you will teach computer science to students in middle school and high school.
That means teach gaming.
No. It said you will teach. It just said you'll teach computer science. The catch was they didn't provide any funding for this.
Right.
So what happened was the school I was consulting for had an art teacher who told me, I'm now teaching computer science. I don't know anything about computers or computer science. I used to teach painting, but the school cut art. And they told me my choices were I could either become the computer science teacher or I could get fired, and they would replace me with somebody who would teach computer science because they're not going to teach art anymore.
Yeah, I wonder which way they chose.
Well, she was teaching computer science, and
obviously
was looking.
Yeah, but I'm not saying you need to cut something.
Well, that's all I'm saying.
I just want to be clear on the record. Like, I think art is important as well.
But just be careful; these kind of things don't turn into the TikTok thing all over again. Parents going, why are my kids not learning technology? And politicians say, we'll require computer science, but then it's an unfunded mandate, and they dump it on the schools.
No, it has to have funding.
And I saw these schools going crazy trying to deal with this because they were required by a law to actually have computer science in their curriculums, but they had no resources, they had no teachers, they had no nothing, and they were forced to reach out to people in the community and say, "Can you help us?" And of course, that was actually stopped then once the education department found out that people were helping them, because that's not allowed. And so basically, I completely agree. I wish this was a federal law that you had to teach technology, because I see it all the time.
Backed with funding, though, because
Backed with funding.
You're right. Education is kind of this interesting scenario where if you mandate things, it has to be coupled with funding and education, not just for the students, but education for the teachers.
Well, they got to have teachers to teach.
There has to be curriculum. There has to be.
You can't just take some poor person that's interested in painting and tell them, "Oh yeah, now you got to teach. Can you write these loops, and can you learn to teach these kids Python programming?
Right.
Here's a book. Good luck." But that's what they did. Although they didn't provide the book.
But you also, with funding, and you're probably going to have some sort of standards of what you mean by this. But you got to be careful not to create another version of Common Core, which it's horrible. Something they'll actually learn something relevant.
I think Common Core is anti-computer science, in my opinion.
I don't even know what it is, so
you're lucky.
I've heard of it. I don't know anything about it.
It's basically a different way of teaching math that if you looked at it with a computer science background, you'd be like,
it's unlogical math.
Yes. Basically, if you were in charge of a team of programmers and they wrote code the way that Common Core teaches math, you would fire everyone. Did I capture that correctly, Tyler?
That's about right. Yeah. If the ancient Chinese found a Taoism way to get to a feng shui math that was pretty and matched the art liberals in the left, that would be the core curriculum being taught for math. It's just god awful.
Yes. Huh. Anyway,
Sam, about the flashback there, Tyler.
This was Sam's story, and Sam hasn't gotten a word in edgewise.
That's all right. You guys said everything that had to be said.
Okay. Thank you for adding that, though. I thought hopefully it comes with some funding.
Yes.
Intel has boasted an attack surface reduction with its new 13th Gen Core vPro platform. Now, it's a bold claim, right? Like, they claim the latest version, so 13th Gen vPro. Now, vPro is really just a moniker that means there's a bunch of extra features in the CPU and the chipset. And by chipset, I also mean an extension of that is Intel's CSME, right? So vPro typically means it has AMT. So they did a study with IOActive. Now, I respect Intel and IOActive respectively. And they say in this study, the attack surface of a 13th Gen core-powered computer, they can reduce it by as much as 70% compared to a 4-year-old PC, which is not an unfair comparison. And most computers in the field are looking at a 4-year. Think about when enterprises refresh their tech. So the problem with this is this might be true from a certain perspective, from Intel's perspective, which is not wrong, by the way. I think they're right in this sense. However, it's the downstream suppliers and implementers of this technology that have to get it right. It's the firmware, the bootloaders, the kernels, the operating system, and virtualization that largely may not use these features that Intel has provided, or they use them wrong, like we've seen in encryption protocols, where the encryption protocol is completely sound, but people screw up the implementation, and therefore their vulnerabilities. So I think that's what was missing from this article for me, was it's all about the implementation. And if you get the implementation wrong, it's going to mean security vulnerabilities, even though you had the opportunity to maybe reduce that attack surface by 70%. Now, on the plus side, these security features, I think, really are moving the needle forward. I think Intel does a really good job and employs some amazingly smart people to come up with this stuff. But again, it has to be in the implementation correctly.
Yeah, I am really curious how they're integrating this into Windows for that kind of attack surface reduction. Like, it's got that new it's TDT, the threat detection technology.
Yep. Well, and then it has to get into the Linux kernels as well.
But this was only for Windows, from what I understood. I mean, there may be protections being built into the Linux kernel, but these protections directly integrate and work at the Windows operating system level for Windows 11. There's direct ties to ransomware protection and file system attack chains, a bunch of stuff that apparently Windows and chip or the hardware leverage in order to prevent this stuff. And that's the part I'm trying to understand. Like, how do you actually prevent execution of code that ransomware is going to use, or a DLL sideload or something like that? How are they doing that with hardware in Windows that is any different than, say, an EDR? Like, I'm still trying to understand the functionality of the.
I was thinking similarly, but of the attack surfaces left, what's the likelihood of that attack surface versus what they took care of? Like you said, Tyler, if the attack vector is getting code to execute that doesn't stop executing, it kind of game over.
Yeah, really. So are we getting, like, there's some memory protection with inside of that, but again, that memory protection only is protecting you against, like, buffer overflow or ASLR bypass stuff. Like, that doesn't really protect the execution of code that the end user executes, right? It's just protecting against exploit. So I am curious, given what we know about ransomware, given what we know about actors and C2 tool sets, and how most infections and initial access is happening, like, are they actually adding any prevention and or detection capabilities that is useful to most consumers, even most end users in an enterprise? Like, I just want to know that. Like, I'd like to know.
We're protecting it with SGX enclaves. That's totally secure, right? Oh, wait. I don't mean, I'm trying not to pick on Intel, but
I know they're doing cool.
No, they try. I mean, they try. But I mean, SGX had its issues, and they recognize that.
I mean, they're adding stuff at the layer that they control.
Right.
I applaud them for that. Like, the integration and what they're adding, great. But does it help? I don't know.
Right. I want Intel to continue working on the layer they do control, just like you said, Tyler. I keep raising the bar, Intel, as far as you can. It's not going to be motherhood and apple pie, but it could help if people leverage it. Like Paul said, if it's implemented right, you're going to get a win here. Maybe just making it a bit harder will be enough to slow things down a little bit. I'm good with that. I just don't want to, overhype it. I'd like to see how this does.
I think in some cases we tend to be overly critical of some of these things, that they do fall down and they have holes, but they do add to the overall level of protection of systems. We look at, things like Secure Boot and Boot Guard. While they have issues, like, there's been research that proven they have issues, but overall they did move the needle forward, which I think is important. We don't want to see anyone just stop and give up and go whatever. Like, oh, there's a way around it, so we're just we're giving up now. I think these levels of protection are important. The other one that I had was, I wanted to move. Something a little kind of less in the weeds. A journalist plugs in an unknown USB drive mailed to him, and it exploded in his face. Did you guys see this article?
I did.
I saw that image somewhere. I just
end user awareness training. This is this month's security awareness training. Don't plug shit into your computer from strangers.
Don't plug in USBs that are like the size of hand grenades.
I don't know what the device. I don't know that I've seen.
There was that one Hackaday that showed you how to make an exploding USB drive, and it took a substantial amount, and it wasn't like huge from a explosion standpoint. Like, it was electronic pops and probably very hot and might have damaged your computer port, but we're not talking about like kill anybody.
No, this was in Ecuador, and it was targeted against journalists. I think one of the journalists received it. It did actually explode. Another one received it and plugged it in.
Said they got mild injuries.
It didn't explode, but yeah, the person that plugged it in and exploded was mild injuries. But I apologize. I read this article like last week and didn't go reread it before the show. But I want to say they talked about how the explosion was actually triggered inside of it. And it was, using the 5 volts in the USB to trigger some kind of explosion.
It's just like a blasting cap. I mean, what they put in there was like the size of a blasting cap, and when it was the explosive. It's exactly how you set off like plastique and that kind of stuff. So C4 and all those kind of explosives have a charge.
A handgun or any kind of rifle cartridge. There's the primer.
Yeah,
and the primer
is blasting cap is used to detonate other explosives.
It's the detonation mechanism.
So if you had it contained and you sent a charge through it, the blasting cap would explode, and the little plastic case around the USB would fly apart. But it's just not really very big, and there is some physics involved.
It's like if you took the primer from a cartridge.
Yeah, and I mean,
you hit it with a hammer, you would get like an explosion.
It's more like an exploding cigar and less like some kind of James Bond gadget. So, like I said, if your USB is the size of a hand grenade, you might want to watch out. But you shouldn't be plugging in stray things anyway.
That's the lesson here. For sure.
I don't think anybody's going to get seriously injured with that either.
But
it could be.
If I had that USB drive auto-execute some interesting payload before blowing itself up, you would totally miss the payload.
That's true. So it could be that. Yeah, it's just a nice little misdirection.
That's what it was. The journalist where it didn't go off used an extender cable and then plugged it into the extender cable, and the voltage reduction,
the voltage drop,
the voltage drop from the extender cable wasn't enough to detonate the device. That's what it was.
Talk about skating.
Always use an extender cable.
That's the moral of the story.
If you're
going to plug random USB devices in,
put the connector out on the window ledge or something, and just
plug it in and run. It's like lighting off fireworks. You plug it in and run.
Yeah. See what happens.
You ever see the TikTok where they're lighting the firework? They're lighting the firework and they're putting it in the jug to make it explode, and they light the firework. And they drop the lighter in, and they run away with the firework in their hands, and you hear it explode. I mean, it's totally like fake news, but yeah.
Leroy Jenkins. It was an interesting story, though. That's why I read it. I read it last week too, and I was like, "This is pretty interesting." And I guess it makes sense that you could do that. I mean, but it also worried me that it wasn't big enough to do much damage. But I like Lee's suggestion that it's misdirection, and that you would really, while everybody's running out of the building because something popped, the thing could sit there and ransomware the whole company.
Right.
We should ring up Larry.
This sounds like Larry.
Yeah.
Where is he anyway?
Blowing stuff up.
Yeah, is he in Ecuador right now?
Yeah, I think he's teaching or something.
Has he got class today?
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's what he said.
Sam, I like your story number 4.
Yeah, that's just what I was looking at.
Yeah, like the Amazon Sidewalk is just, I think as security folks, we read this stuff about what Amazon's doing and with Ring and all that stuff, and we just like, our shit detectors go off like a lot.
Yeah.
That was my sense when I read anything about Amazon and Ring. These are reasons why I've basically I've ripped out every single Amazon device. In fact, I haven't had an Amazon device on my network in a long time, although I do a Ring.
You just use Huawei, right?
I use Huawei. Yeah. Yes. I actually use Google, but I don't know. The Amazon stuff is just cringeworthy, man.
Well, I think this sounds very valuable. I'm glad to see a grid network come out. I remember when they had one laptop per child, and they were supposed to connect by a grid network, and as far as I know, that never worked. But this really works. They say it can reach 90% of the people on Earth with a grid network, so low-power devices without Wi-Fi can get on the internet with low bandwidth, going over Bluetooth low energy, low raw for long range, and frequency shift keying, whatever that is, 900 megahertz. But anyway, it means you can make any small device, and it can get some connection to the internet through this, grid network.
Oh, this is Skynet.
This is
this is definitely how my botnet is going to work. This is what I'm programming it for. I'm going to transition hop from device to device using a grid network just like this. I've been waiting for this for a while.
There'd be so many devices that would benefit from this.
No, it is. It's a great. I mean, it is a good idea. I think there's a lot of potential for it to have problems, but it is a nice idea that you can create these mesh networks. Helps schools. It helps all kinds of things, but it can also be abused. So you have to be careful.
It's similar to like Apple AirTags and stuff, and
right.
It's kind of scary.
The same thing.
Right? It's kind of scary to think about how connected now all of our devices are.
Yeah, it's no scarier than AI. It's just, the new thing. It'll make a million gadgets, and a bunch of them will be great, and a few of them will be scary.
I mean, you're really sitting in the world where a lot of people are going to have embedded devices in their like persons pretty soon. And I don't mean what's embedded in you, Paul, but I mean, but
different kind of device.
Doesn't that just mean that I can then drop whatever implant device in whatever network, and I essentially always have the ability to have it be able to get to the internet and call home?
Right.
Like this.
Yeah.
Well, I thought this is like a good argument for how you need to have some kind of serial identification of various devices. Again, it's like driver signing, where I have an insulin pump that's embedded in me, and it needs to connect so the doctor can monitor it, because they're doing that more and more. But it needs to be registered and cleared, and you don't want stuff just jumping on these networks and causing all kinds of chaos, because the more the good stuff you have, the more bad stuff will cause problems. So it's definitely a challenge, I think.
I think there was a design decision made for these glasses that didn't work out so well for this particular use case. Talk amongst yourselves.
Paul's about to smash that ice cube and the whole thing.
I want to try some of that cognac.
Pour the cognac over the ice, and the ice will drop right in.
Think so?
Yeah.
All right, we're going to try this.
It's an experiment, or it might explode. I don't know.
This is science.
Yeah.
No, just keep it away from USB port so it doesn't explode.
But you know, Bill Nye the Science Guy has a show on Netflix. Have you guys watched that?
No, I haven't watched that.
I know some of us grew up watching Bill Nye the Science Guy.
Yeah, no, I like him.
Yeah, it's really goofy and corny. I mean, he does one on. So I watched 2 of his episodes that are relevant to my interests. So I watched one on like hackers and computer crime and security, and I watched one on marijuana. the one on computer security stuff, I was like, oh, it's like really cheesy. The one on marijuana is actually hilarious because of all the puns he makes. It opens up the episode where he goes into a dispensary and he's buying marijuana, and he's like, it's for science. And the girl behind the counter, I mean, nothing against her, but like, she doesn't recognize him. So when he says, oh, this is all for science, like, I'm dying laughing because she has no idea who he is.
That was the same thing he used in that series he did about prostitution, right?
Look at that. I even had to pour the cognac.
Yeah,
it's just your hot air melted my... I'm sorry. What were we talking? We were talking about something.
Bill Nye and prostitution.
And marijuana.
And marijuana.
And there's the title for the episode.
There you go. Bill Nye, hookers and weed.
That'll bring people in.
Yes,
most likely. Yeah.
Except for the younger generation that doesn't know who Bill Nye is.
Just call it booty.
And then they'll be disappointed.
Yeah, true.
I had one episode of the news that had booty in the title, and it got like the all-time record number of views.
And you were talking about pirates.
Yeah, it was called Pirate Booty.
What were we talking about?
We were talking about the grid network.
Developer kits on the way.
What's that, Tyler?
Said Amazon Sidewalk developer kits on the way.
Yeah. I think, but Tyler, I think what you're pitching that as is an always on, under the radar, backdoor, like C2 channel, like communication mechanism for a C2 channel. Yeah.
Well, I think I can think of a use for it, and that is that in this neighborhood where the homeowner's sprinkler system is not wirelessly connected, we don't have an outdoor Wi-Fi, and it's too expensive to run a 2-wire lead around. Having that kind of a network to throw all those sprinkler controllers on there, low bandwidth, they don't need much connectivity. They just need to update their programming. every now and then, it would be a win, and it would save us a fortune in other network options.
Yeah, and the driving force of people wanting to control all that stuff with their mobile devices is probably going to push that kind of thing even more, because that really simplifies it. So now you just
you show up in front of your neighbors is how I control my sprinkler system. I've had a smart sprinkler system controller I'm on generation 2 of my, and I just like to go out, talk to my neighbors and be like, we're old, we have yards, we talk to our neighbors, and I'm like, oh, I should water my lawn. And I go on my phone, and I start my sprinklers, and they just come on. I'm like, yeah, see that?
I do
It's
that.
bragging
I
rights.
just
It's bragging
plan it around
rights.
the timer.
Or you just plan it? You don't have a Wi-Fi enabled smart sprinkler?
I have a smart sprinkler. It's just called this guy named Vinny that comes by twice a year and turns it on.
Yeah, but you don't control the schedule from a.
No.
Oh, come on! It gets the weather data, and if it.
Mine has weather sensors.
You have an old school rain sensor.
Yeah, it's got a rain sensor.
It's a rain sensor.
Or it has me. I go, it's raining. Turn it off.
You got to get with the times, man.
It's expensive and it breaks a lot and it's got security issues, so I don't want to deal with it.
So it's like everything else.
Yeah, so I can just leave it with, Vinny comes twice a year and I go out and turn the thing on and turn the thing off when it needs
Is
to
his
run.
name really Vinny?
Yeah. He's not getting replaced with an AI anytime soon.
Sorry. Sam, you have a comment?
Well, I want to talk about my story number 8. You people may know how beneficial this is. So CISA is getting intel, and they're warning people that they are being ransomwared.
Yep.
Because people like their network providers have detected suspicious activity on the network. So they claim they prevented something like 30 or 60 ransomware events with this. What do you guys think of this?
Probably a lot more than that, actually.
30 or 60 is not a big number. Also, if CISA and your internet provider, ISP, are telling you that you have ransomware, you've got to make a better investment in effort in your own cybersecurity program. That's just my 2 cents.
So there's a lot of other, like, this is the cyber research community. That's a lot of the pointing into the spear people that are gaining access to these actors' infrastructure, seeing files and or watching, have automation systems to collect this data and preemptively get ahead of it. Like, this info gets passed through very strategic working groups and the Joint Cyber Defense, it's JCTC. That collective is very critical to protecting most of the world. So we'll say it's a pretty small and trusted set of people that.
Yeah,
that do
and
this.
Tyler, I want to say the advancement in this area is the communication,
Yes.
not necessarily the technology
there's
or the
nothing new.
methods. Yeah, dude,
There's
like
nothing new.
back in the day, we would gain access to an IRC server that was a CNC for a thing, and we would figure out who was connected to it, and then like manually we'd have to go call people and go, oh, like when I was in university, it's calling back to that university, and I know who runs security in that university, and I'd call that person up, and I'd be like, hey, you're compromised, and we were in a trusted group, and that was just with universities. I feel like the advancement, Tyler, is the breadth of communication and how quickly, and I think that's important. I think that is an advancement.
Well, it turns into a trust issue because a long time ago, Ken Bell and I and everybody in Rhode Island knows Ken Bell. We were talking. He was a state trooper. We were talking to businesses and about, would you call the state police if you had a compromise?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was 100% no, never.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to figure out a way to change that. And it was about getting people together, about getting them to trust that they knew somebody, because there was a big difference when they knew Ken.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could call Ken.
Right, yes.
And say,
yes.
hey, Ken, what do you think? And so I think some of this is just about, a lot of these infrastructure organizations don't have great cyber hygiene. They don't have great cybersecurity, organizations, and they're real paranoid. So they don't want people to see that they're incompetent or think that they're incompetent because they've been doing it this way since the 1970s, and they don't want to have to come forward and say, we don't know what we're doing. So if CISA could build a kind of trust with all these people,
it's CISA.
I don't care, however you want to say it. You say CISA, I say CISA. I'll be in Scotland before you. Now let's have a tomato sandwich. But
I mean,
I'm not throwing any tomatoes at you, buddy.
but I think if this helps communicate to them and they get comfortable with this, it doesn't hurt. Well, let's put it that way.
Right.
And so it's like you said earlier, it moves the needle forward a little bit. Maybe it doesn't solve all the problems in the world, but if it makes one of those pipeline companies or a nuclear reactor company say, okay, well, let's participate in this, it may improve things a little bit.
No, there's not really a participation either, though. Like, again, this is nothing. This is just a communication channel that takes the onus, and oftentimes, like, the attribution cannot come from certain people or places or working groups. You can't tilt your hands. You have to have a trusted way to get information to places without saying who or how you got that information. So this provides that avenue, and in places where things like infrastructure providers where we weren't able to take down an actor or gain access to infrastructure and just deal with the problem, it provides a path where maybe they got bulletproof hosting or they have something outside of our purview, we haven't gained access to something yet. It provides a path to limit the collateral damage to small businesses or even larger businesses that may not know or have a reaction to it because it is a little bit stealthy.
Yeah, and Tyler, to your point, I think you do have to compartmentalize the information. And I think there's two levels. There's I know who's been owned, and I'm going to tell them. But you don't want that to be public, because if the attackers are listening, they're going to go, oh, like I got outed. I need to adjust, or I'm just going to maybe if I see that before anyone can respond, I'm going to wipe all my stuff. So there's that. But the more secret tradecraft, if you will, is how I got that information. And certainly you don't want that to leak as well, because that could have much more far-reaching effects. But you do have to compartmentalize it, I think, into those two different ways. There's I know who's been pwned, and here's how I know who's been pwned. You got to keep that even more secret. Tyler's just smiling because he knows
who's been pwned.
He knows who's been pwned and how they know they've been pwned.
Well, I like it anyway. I found that all these people were when we were auditing and we were auditing some of this kind of stuff, and they were very, very insecure when you went to talk to them. They were very paranoid and very tight-lipped about everything, and they did not want to share. And so when we started running exercises with them and including them and bringing them on board, they did start talking. They started, and I understand that this is not a two-way communication, but it's a start down that road to saying, I kind of, I'm comfortable reporting something to these guys or whatever. So it's a start.
Well, it's yet another reason you should meet your local CISA folks. I mean, yeah, they could be reported. They've got tools to help you that you can leverage too to help raise the bar, which. Well, I don't know that everybody's really at the same place in terms of self-efficiency.
But it's a great point, Lee. To Doug's point, you got to know the person to build some trust. CISA puts a person in every state as your representative to be that person that you should trust. And your also that person, in order to achieve that position at CISA, has to have some kind of clearance and background check. They have to have a certain level of clearance to hold that.
And so when you know those people, you can do back channel communications.
Right.
You can get, you can then call and say, hey, Ken, what do you think about this? And we saw that happen. And people would call in and ask, off the record, what do you think about this? And they could give them advice.
Our local CISA rep is Vinny. It's the same guy that does your sprinkler system.
Yeah, no, I talked to him about that's where I learned it was pronounced CISA, but
It's
well,
not
so,
Vinny.
so
I think
you guys
it's
know
I think it's
your
Mike,
Rhode Island CISA guy?
It's not Vinny. I think his name is Mike. But anyway,
I think it is Mike.
It is Mike. Yes, it is Mike.
Josh, you know who it is for Idaho, right?
Is it Vinny?
I don't think Josh is still here.
Oh, Josh or Tyler?
I mean, Tyler. You know who it is for Idaho?
Tyler's adjusting his sprinkler system on the app on his phone.
It's
it's
Josh Down. He was our local InfraGard lead, but he couldn't do work for the FBI and CISA, so he had to pick one.
It's CISA.
Interesting. See, I keep most of my my CISA guys from the red team on.
Tyler says it right.
Yeah, no, I think you had contacts up there already.
I think it was my local CISA representative that told me it's pronounced CISA.
And again, we could do a whole podcast just on that.
Again,
Yeah,
Lee's
it would
like,
be
Paul, I
it would
don't give a
probably be
shit.
good.
How it's
We
pronounced.
could do a whole pronunciation podcast, and we could argue for days.
Oh my God, Doug, you and I would argue for days
yeah.
because it's Damon and not Demon. But in any case,
Oh, look at the time, boys.
oh,
How about,
SSH. You want to talk about SSH and keys?
I was going to ask about mob story number 11 because we're talking about CISA.
Oh, who's
That-
story number 11?
Sam.
That's
New
that's
new
the title.
new
your
CISA
your
tool.
Goose tool.
Yeah, this is
CISA.
just one of those handy things CISA offers to people. And
Yeah.
they made this thing called the Untitled Goose tool to get forensic telemetry from Azure Active Directory. So that seems just handy.
Oh, I thought, Tyler, what was the tool that you taught me how to use that got,
Tock.
what is it called?
Hawk.
Nope.
Said.
Oh God, it was a while ago.
No, it was,
One of my friends
it was-
got popped, and I was like, Tyler, I need a tool that can tell me about Azure AD stuff, that if someone put an email filtering rule in and it's somewhere buried in like the policies in AD, and I need to run this tool and it gives me a complete dump of that. What was that called?
Dump ACL.
it was Top Cyber's Hawk.
It was Hawk. Yes. Is that what you said before? Hawk?
Yeah, that's what he said.
I misunderstood what you
I
were
thought he
saying.
said awk,
Yes,
but I thought,
you
he was
did
making
too.
jokes.
I thought
So
you
I
did.
made a said joke, but that was okay.
Yes. No, you're right.
Yeah.
It was Hawk. It was called Hawk. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, it's really good. But
H
this
is
is very
silent.
similar.
Is this so? Correct me if I'm wrong. This is very similar to what Hawk does. Yeah. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
And I have to say, as most of us know, like I'm not a Windows person. Like I just fake it till I almost make it. But when Tyler like walked me through running Hawk, and then I was looking at the results and parsing through it, I'm like, oh, like even I can find, like, here's the problem, like it's right there. And so that was really good. And so Sam and Lee, to your points, right? This sounds very similar to that, which is extremely, extremely useful. In my limited experience in this arena.
But Hawk doesn't have you do a goosey graze or a goosey honk.
It's got the goosey goose.
Yes, they freaking put those commands in. I think it's hilarious.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah,
I wonder if we can play on Hawk, like Goose and Hawk. Like
Like what is it with the animal theme in this?
Yeah.
It's weird.
I wish I knew who over at Sandia did this. I'd ask them. This was done in conjunction with Sandia.
Yeah.
In fact, I probably do know. I just don't know.
Yeah, I used to know people at Sandia too. I don't know if they're still there or not.
Yeah, there's some great
also,
folks over there.
not really a story we need to cover, but if you guys are not following the 3CX desktop app, this is definitely a huge supply chain thing. I believe Sentinel-1 and was it Mandiant? One of the two, but one of the threat intel companies has put out some stuff on Smooth Operator. There's a campaign going on where you got the update from the vendor, signed binary MSI package that does have malicious stuff in it. The vendor is just barely figuring this out. Users were on forums and they were writing exclusions because all the vendors were flagging as malicious, and the vendor said it was signed and it looked good, and it was, everyone thought it was false positives. So there's all these exclusions out there, but it's phone software. It's a PBX VoIP hybrid kind of software that is in a lot of very large organizations, but it is a
Well, I
huge
think did the pandemic kind of fuel this too, where you can have your call center people work from home, and because they work from home, you need to give them a VoIP phone, but rather than deploy a physical device, you just give them some software.
Yep.
Soft phones.
Yep.
Yeah.
But and the 3CX is a popular one. It's similar to like the Cisco ones or Vodafones or whatever. There's a bunch of them, but yeah.
Is this one of these freeware PBXs?
Not freeware, no.
No, this looks like a commercial product thing.
Okay.
Yep. This is in some big organizations, I can tell you now.
Yeah. I asked that because I'd heard previously there'd been some issues with some of the free PBXs, and part of the problem was there wasn't a lot of team to fix them. But on a commercial one, we can expect a fix. Whether anybody deploys the fix, that's another problem.
Well, so the fix is tricky because this looks like a supply chain attack where they were able to embed the code within inside of the legitimate update package that came down signed from the vendor. So very similar to SolarWinds.
The old
Yeah.
tricks are the best tricks, right?
Yeah, go read the blog. I posted it in Discord, and we'll make sure it's out there. But there's some very extreme patches and fixes you've got to get on top of now because the initial access for this is happening. So there's info stealers happening and malware being delivered as we speak. So patch your shit.
My story number 20. I'm a big fan of Matthew Garrett. And his writings include both UEFI, bootguard, and firmware kind of stuff, but also kind of other general posts. In his post, "We need better support for SSH host certificates," affords us the luxury of talking about a few different topics, one of which is the GitHub SSH key, private key that was leaked. We can talk about that kind of independently. So accidentally committed their SSH RSA private key to a repository, which is ironic because it's GitHub and they committed their own key to their repository, but they also have software to like help prevent and detect you as a user of GitHub, putting.
Well,
your
it was very
keys out
briefly was what they said, and that they removed it almost immediately, and they just revoked the keys because they wanted to be absolutely certain that nobody got a hold of it.
And that's the right response.
It is. It was exactly how you need to handle it.
It was the right way to handle it. Now, what's interesting is you may also think that it would be difficult to describe TLS in a few sentences. Matthew Garrett has accomplished that. The most impressive thing for me about Matthew's article, other than his even awesome insights that follow this, is he spends a few sentences, and if you had someone that was somewhat familiar with technology, that was like, how does encryption work when I go to Amazon and I want to go buy something? Mm-hmm. You could point them to this post, and they could read it. So. He says every website supports TLS has an asymmetric pair of keys divided into public and private key. When you contact the website, it gives you a certificate that contains the public key, and your browser then performs a series of cryptographic operations against it to A, verify the remote site possesses the private key, which prevents someone from just copying the certificate to another system pretending to be a legitimate site. B, generate an ephemeral encryption key that is used to actually encrypt the traffic between your browser and the site. If you asked me to describe that in those couple of sentences, that would take me like 2 weeks to put together.
No, it's a good description.
Yes, we could describe it. Could we distill it down the way Matthew has? I'm like, dude, that was awesome. I thought that was pretty, that was impressive. But then goes on to describe how SSH, he had to describe that in a very condensed fashion. To put that, even if you know how it works, put that in your mind. So bookmark that, make a note of that in your mind. Then think about how SSH works, which is totally different. Because SSH key pairs in SSH protocol doesn't use TLS. It uses trust on first use. When you first connect to a system, SSH tells you, hey, I don't recognize the public key that came back to me on this one. Do you want to store that for later?
Yeah.
And you're supposed to validate that, which is.
But it's all manual process, or you can run. You can put something.
You have to be your own CA in that sense, if you think about it, and then go, okay, yeah, I trust that on first use. If I connect to that server again and the key changes, it obviously, we've all experienced that. It tells you, oh, that key changed. In which case, we all just type yes and we move on with life because you're supposed to validate it if it fails.
Well,
it doesn't match your
they were
host.
trying to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, which was this boogeyman of days gone by in that context. So most people just assumed that the first contact was okay and that that you were the one that typed it in, so it must be fine. And there would have to be this whole chain of events that would be threatening, like DNS poisoning or something, in order to keep you, to get you in the room.
Or it's a VM that I keep destroying and spinning.
No, it absolutely could be, and there's many flaws with that. But initially, I think it was just this is better than Telnet. Let's use it.
Yes.
Right. Well, the other problem, Doug, is that the SSH key isn't issued by a known certificate authority.
Correct.
It's self-signed. It's self-issued. Yep. So you just have to trust it's where you went.
It's just an old school idea. I mean, it was like, people that are connecting using these technologies were not bad people. They were just, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's just, but that was the sort of mentality I got out of it. Was when I was first using that kind of stuff, I was like, oh yeah, I know who this is.
And this blog post is like, it's like really thick and like thought provoking because he puts like in parentheses, it's actually possible to glue the general PKI infrastructure into SSH certificates. Please do not do this. End parentheses. So and he doesn't offer any explanation other than that. And I'm like, that's wow. Like I gotta go think about that now. Like, hold on. Like that's I gotta take a note, and then I gotta reserve some time in my brain to go think about that for a little while. But then he gets into the GitHub case.
Yeah,
but
he might be wrong about that because remember, the DNS over HTTPS is what won in the marketplace, even though the purists say it's illogical. So just putting everything over HTTPS is probably a really smart solution, practically.
Yeah, but he does link to his GitHub on PKI certificates for SSH and says SSH certificates are limited in their usefulness. A certificate can only be signed with a single CA key, so no chains of trust can be established, and there's no way to tie them into the global PKI. But what if? Correct. Then, right in his README on his own GitHub where he wrote the code, it asks, should I use this? And he says no. I love the whole thing. It's just very thought-provoking, Sam, right? Like, I think it's what we're coming down to. Well, it is.
But, ultimately, why do we have two different kinds of encryption going on? Why don't we just use TLS for everything? Upgrade SSH to version 3 or something that is now compatible with TLS.
We have the TLS hammer, therefore everything should look like a nail.
Well, why not? Why do we have multiple competing systems to do the same thing?
I think it's a valid point of like
people
debate
would
and
have
discussion.
To update.
Like we need to have Matthew on the show and we need to have this discussion. I think it would be amazing.
Yeah,
I remember.
We could do a deep dive here.
We did some.
I think that the trick is I think SSH, like Doug has said, it was engineered to solve the telnet problem and the R command problem. Remember when you could compile it to replace all the R commands?
R login, yeah.
And it was great because suddenly you weren't going in the clear anymore.
Yep.
You didn't have etchost.equiv anymore.
Other things. Early in my career in security, you passed the security audit if you got rid of telnet. And even if you were SSH version 1, there was like a window where that was still better than telnet, and we hadn't really figured out that V1 was as horribly insecure as it was.
Yep.
Well, it was still better than telnet.
It was still better than
telnet.
That was first security audit script I wrote was to scan for port 23 TCP, and if you had it, you failed.
You failed.
And I didn't care.
Then we evolved, and you could fingerprint
listener on port 23.
Right, but then we evolved and we said, okay, if you're V1, that's probably like it got proven enough that was really bad.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is we've had this entire conversation basically based on Matthew's first like few paragraphs in his blog post, and we haven't even got to the GitHub issue yet, which he has which is a really good theory about the GitHub case where how does an SSH key get committed to a GitHub repo? And he's like, well, I mean, it's very much common sense. I mean, the rest of it after he sets the premise is kind of like after you read it, you're like, oh, I think he's right. He's like, I don't have any insider knowledge, but GitHub.com is not just one server. It's a lot of servers. No. And those servers all need the private key in some capacity. And how do you do that? You can't do that in HSM because you take a big performance hit. So you got to like script it out there. Someone made an oops, and it's not that someone's fault. Like someone made an oops.
Yeah,
it's basically the summary. I mean, a very horrible summary of his great post in the latter few paragraphs.
The thing that stuck in my craw in this one is the GitHub announcement that said, "Out of an abundance of caution, we rotated the key." I'm like, FFS. Abundance of caution. Damn, your private key was exposed. Of course you're rotating your public key.
The important point to that is, Lee, they have the facility to rotate their private key.
Oh, absolutely. That's
right?
awesome.
That's the
They just shouldn't be
Not
so.
at all.
That's the vote,
As a
but that's
matter
the
of
vote.
course.
That's the
shouldn't be
vote.
so quick to pat
I don't care that
themselves
anyone can lose a key. Look, anyone
Right,
can lose a private key, right? What breeds confidence is your ability to go update that key and rotate that key.
Right. And to do
don't
it.
start congratulating yourself because you did what you were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and don't call it an abundance of caution because it was you were supposed to do.
Yeah, it was.
I think it was
Shit
it was-
happened. We updated the key.
I was talking to, I think it was Nick Stark today. He was talking about the boot card keys that can be fused into the board. And there's actually 4 slots, right, that you can fuse keys. So if you fuse a key into the first slot, the idea is if that key gets leaked or the corresponding private key gets leaked, you can fuse a key into the second one that invalidates the key in the first slot. He said what happened in certain cases is the manufacturer decided to fuse the same key into all 4 slots. That erodes my confidence level in a huge way. Yes.
Excellent.
So if once
design.
is good, 4 times is better.
Right.
But that would make it so much simpler to write the code and make it work.
It
This
sure
is what
would.
you always do. This is like allow full control to everyone, and now it works. The boss
Right.
is
There it
happy.
goes.
Right.
CH
And I'm
mod.
I'd hate to think about the math, and at that point, it's really not about math. You're just implementing someone else's
yeah, just
math that
if
makes all
key
that work.
equals key.
Yeah.
If not, go to key 2.
I was thinking too far down
Yeah.
the stack into the math that makes all those keys
CH
work. and my
mod
brain started-
777.
Yeah. Mm.
Well, code was so much simpler when my session key simply incremented by 1,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't secure. This was fun though.
Certainly not. Yeah,
Yeah.
Matthew. There's it's interesting on the Eclipsium Below the Surface show is where I'm bringing on. It's kind of like my fanboy list of guests in firmware security. So I'll give you a little background. Before I started at Eclipsium last June, well before that, I was researching UEFI security, trying to understand it and read. I started with the spec, and I was like, holy crap, it's 3,000 pages. Who can help me understand some of the stuff? And started looking at the research. And what I ended up with, even after I started at Eclipsium, started researching specific topics, is this list of researchers that were publishing information about UEFI and firmware security. So Matthew Garrett was one, Nick Stark was the other, Vincent Zimmer was. So I had this list of folks that were publishing research in this area. And so a lot of times you'll hear on this show me mention posts by these folks because I follow them very intently, and they're not just posting about UEFI security, they're posting about other things, and they're just really awesome individuals in their own right, which is how, Matthew was writing about this SSH issue, and I was like, awesome write-up. So good stuff all around. That's how I came to follow some of this stuff. We talked about firmware encryption. I came back to that article, the Intel one. There was undocumented amplify. Some of these I didn't actually write up. PHP filter change. There was something else I wanted to. Oh, the Apple Studio display. That was the other one. I still have questions. You read this one too, Lee? I think it begs more questions than we have answers, which doesn't surprise me in the context of Apple. But I was like, hold on. You've got a display, a monitor that runs firmware. And then I'm like, okay, how do you update that firmware? If there's a vulnerability in that firmware, how do you exploit it? If you exploit a vulnerability in the firmware of your monitor, what does that give you as an attacker? And I don't really think I have great answers to any of those questions at this point. Now, let's put Apple aside. There's other monitor kind of hacks that I've seen that affect the monitor, but your monitor, of course, interacts with your system. And if we put DisplayPort or HDMI aside for a moment, Thunderbolt is more, I think, tightly coupled to your system. And how does that interaction work? Is it, in this case, I think it was an app on your Apple device could exploit a vulnerability in your monitor. And again, I had to search like high and low on the internet just to get even that much friggin' information about this vulnerability.
The Thunderbolt has the ability to support up and downstream and direct access. In fact, I think it has direct memory access.
Yeah, it's a bus
so
interface.
It has to.
Yeah.
It does.
I really want to pause right there, Tyler. I think that's correct because it has to have like a performance level that is unparalleled. In order to, this studio display is like 10K or some ridiculous thing, right? In order to do that level of resolution, it needs direct memory access to perform at that level. Did I capture that correctly? Yeah.
I mean, even like DisplayPort like 1.2 has the ability to do up and downstream across DisplayPort, so you can daisy chain monitors and only have one cord connected to your computer. So Thunderbolt has way more access than that.
Right.
So take HDMI aside, take DisplayPort aside, and the ability to read input and output displays, and you've got firmware on the chip itself and the controller that is passing that video. Thunderbolt's, that's crazy. There's probably almost an iOS OS with inside of that, which the timing on this is very interesting with the release of the iOS vulnerabilities that have not been released for jailbreaking, but are soon to come out for all the modern iOS stuff. So
but you could have like a triple layer of firmware. You've got the firmware on your Thunderbolt chipset that is inside your computer. If you've got any kind of hub or device in between those, you could have firmware on that device. Then you've got your monitor or whatever device is connected that also has firmware.
Yep.
That's crazy.
And I believe even the cables themselves have chips with inside of them in order, like there's certain things that you have to watch on the cables, just like the HDMI cables. There were vulnerabilities that could be flashed to that. There's a certain level of code. It's not like super intelligent code, but there's code there.
There's code on. Oh, hold on. My wife took one of her phones because she has like a phone for work and a phone for personal stuff, because I made her separate that, and she doesn't like me to this day for that and a lot of other reasons. But she complains about having the multiple phone thing, and I get it. But I gave her like an old Pixel, and she's like, "Oh, I just need to charge it." And she plugged it into my laptop charger for this laptop, and it was totally fine. And I'm like, I don't think you should do that because I don't trust firmware. And then she'd like anything I say after that, she just kind of tunes out. But I'm like, in my brain, I want to
something.
I don't really trust that, because there has to be some kind of firmware and intelligent communication that is negotiating voltage at that point. And I'm like, and I see this with all my kids' devices, and it's the same thing. I'm like, oh, you plugged your Chromebook into that adapter. I'm like, there's some kind of, and they're like, wah, 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 wah. But like, that's a thing, Tyler, to your point. There is some kind of software on these power charging devices that is negotiating this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's even, I had to take my car to the shop this morning, and they gave me a loaner. The loaner has the wireless charging pad on it.
Yep.
I threw my phone on it. It started charging, and then after it was done, the thing started blinking at me. I'm like, how are they communicating again?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say trust nothing on my phone. It was locked and the whole time. I mean, I was glad for the charge up, but
I bought a battery pack that has a wireless charger on it, and I can stick that on an iPhone or a Pixel device, and it charges it. Right. Which I thought was pretty neat. Well, that's kind of cool.
There's some negotiation. So getting back to the firmware thing, the studio monitor thing, an app may be able to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. My question is it on the display or is it on your host?
I'm so happy you asked that question, Lee, because I had the same question, and I don't have a definitive answer for you. I had the same. You make me feel so much better about myself, because I'm like, I don't know the answer either. Yeah.
I'm a memory corruption error. I mean, this thing has DMA access, so I'm thinking corrupting memory on my host is a lot worse than corrupting it on my display. My display, I basically can do a hard boot.
Why can't Apple just tell us? I don't
Well,
even want,
shouldn't it be
like,
ways
you
if
don't
it's
have to
an
tell me
update
the
point?
memory addresses and how to exploit the vulnerability, although that would be cool. But, like, at least give me something to make an informed risk decision about this.
And if you try to look up the CVE, there's nothing. It's just this is a reserved CVE. And I'm sure Proteus at Pangu is under non-disclosure for now.
Right?
So there's not going to be anything published on that for a while. Like, damn it.
Yeah, like is there a kernel running on the studio display?
Maybe.
That's what Tyler was saying. I'm pretty sure he's right. There's an OS
think
running
he's
on
right.
that display.
There's an OS on the monitor.
And that would be how they do it. I mean, I think that's how Apple does stuff. Is they've got
Yeah, no, some of their stuff like the displays actually has like the equivalent of an iPhone running.
That's what I mean. Yeah, they just got like a small computer running that whole display, and that's interacting with the kernel on the actual PC.
Right, and think about how fast those CPUs are in those phones. They could totally do the display job.
Right.
Especially if it's just
Or
a management
maybe an M1.
job.
You
Yeah.
could put a full M1 in there.
Huh. Wow.
There's a computer inside your monitor.
Oh, why not?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, but I think that's independent of studio displays as well. I think
It could be in many monitors or like that.
It can be in any kind of monitor.
Hadn't really thought about that, but that's kind of scary.
What concerns me from a security perspective is this security through obscurity. Right. And then like on so many levels Apple can release this advisory and it begs a lot of questions and I get nothing. And that's it's what bugs me about the Apple ecosystem, that they could be the most secure platform on the planet, or they could be the most vulnerable platform on the planet, or somewhere in between. And how the hell would I know?
Yep.
I'll give you 3 guesses. The first 2 don't count. What CVE is in the latest OS update for the Mac?
Yeah. So they're going to fix it and never tell you what happened.
Exactly.
Well, there's the vulnerability existed in the display and in the OS. I didn't look to see if it was also in iOS, but I bet you it was.
Probably all interrelated.
So
time to reverse engineer that update.
But apparently you can only update the firmware on the display if you're running Mac OS 13.
There was something weird about, like, did the update for the display come down in the latest Mac OS update, or did you have to go through a different step to make sure it updates your monitor?
Pretty sure it was embedded in that update, but I don't know if it gets applied by that update or not. I mean, I think it's like the watch where you have to do something.
I don't. Well, yeah. So the Apple
Watch OS comes. The logic to apply the watch OS update requires the newest iOS update.
Okay, I think that's how it works in Google too, because I think I saw something where my watch was updating, and I think that was because I updated my Pixel because there was the Samsung chipset vulnerability we talked about last week.
The chip thing, yeah.
Yeah, I updated to fix that, and then I don't think it's automatic that it updates your watch. It's interesting. Like, when does it?
But it probably told you, hey, dude.
It might have.
I mean, my iPhone pops up a little thing eventually that says, I got something for the watch.
Right. Yeah, I think it's
I bet the Pixel does something similar.
Eventually, I think is the operative word there. I think if I didn't go in and force it, it would eventually update my watch.
So
I'm the same way. When I'm looking at the updates, I see there's one for the watch, so I just go over and start clicking.
Yeah. Sam?
So if you have a Pixel, that brings me to your story number 9 I wanted to hear about, because this one affected the images on the Pixel being cropped, but it also affects Microsoft.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week, so this is like a continuing saga. This is like exactly how it works on how to recover it. This has been a problem. Like, this whole image thing has been a problem for a long time, Sam, where people have tried to redact information and or crop it. And
it seems like it would be so easy to do that right.
Right? But the thing to do it right is you gotta blow away the original stuff.
Right.
And not store the original stuff. But on like a Pixel, it stores the original data from your image and kind of just overlays your modifications, because it wants to make sure you have a good user experience. Even though Google's not Apple, it still wants to make sure you have a good user experience, and it can like go back and undo changes so you don't lose your original image, which I get because like sometimes you modify an image and you're like, oh, like I really screwed that up. I just want the original back, and it wants you to be able to go back to that.
Remember back in the day when Office documents would store all your changes, and the only way to get a document that didn't have all its history in was do basically a save as and create a new document. And then it got like 10%.
And then wipe the directory where the other one was stored.
Well, that too, but I'm just saying to have a document that didn't have all that metadata embedded in it.
Yep, it was really tough to get rid of that stuff because I used to make cases for forensic exams. And I was always trying to wipe all the metadata so that people wouldn't go look at it and find out who made it and whatever. And it was really hard to do. Every time I think I had it handled, I'd send those exams out and somebody come back and go, Doug White wrote this. It's like, God damn it.
Oh, and what struck me about this article, Sam, was when they started talking about zlib and compression, it makes use of LZ77 and Huffman coding.
Yeah.
Does anyone know in my world and my J job where Huffman coding comes into play?
I think it's to transmit data. Ethernet.
Do we know which subsystem in PCs took advantage of Huffman coding?
Yeah, isn't that the UEFI where the TPM passes the keys from TPM to the bootloader?
It could be, but it was also when, I don't know if it was ESET researchers or someone else, that they were reverse engineering Intel ME. And then when they were reverse engineering Intel ME firmware, it was used in Huffman coding. At that point, I was like, in the Paul database, what is Huffman? I had to go research. I'm like, oh, okay. It's what's the one in Silicon Valley? What's the compression in Silicon Valley? It's like that, but different.
Middle out.
It is not middle out compression. It's Huffman coding compression, which is different. Not as
rather fight than switch, Doug.
Yeah, not as entertaining as middle out compression, but
we won't provide any demonstrations of middle out compression.
Please, if you're wondering what we're talking about, go look it up in private.
It's not safe for work, but it is funny.
It is not safe for work, but it's one of the funniest.
I saw that before I saw the show.
I think it's the funniest nerd moment ever.
It's really funny. Yeah,
it is the funniest nerd. It is in adult-oriented humor, but also like nerd-oriented humor. One of the best.
And it was so realistic. I was like, I can really see somebody having this conversation.
Someone actually implemented it, though.
Oh, well,
someone actually wrote an algorithm to implement
just the way
what
that conversation evolved. I was like, I could easily see a bunch of people having that conversation.
It's like one of the funniest moments ever in TV I've ever watched in my life, dude. It really is. It really is.
So don't watch it at work, but you can check it out if you have it. I think that's still streaming.
Doug's story number 3 caught my eye just because it's a local company for me.
Oh, Micron.
I just put that on there because they were talking about, Micron was just about, they'd had such a terrible time. Although if you read the story, it doesn't sound that bad. It's like, our revenues dropped from $3 billion to $2.5 billion. I mean, which is a drop, but
no, that's a serious drop, dude. $500 million is a lot of money.
But you still made $2.5 billion. So
we're talking revenue or profit?
No, it was revenue. So
okay.
I mean, so maybe they were. I don't know if they were losing money, but the story it was interesting to me. But then what was really interesting was because I was sort of on that whole AI thing. It sort of winds up with Micron saying, look, AI is going to need a lot of silicon in the next 10 years, so we're not down for the count yet. So, in fact, I went and looked at their stock price, and I thought about buying stuff because I was like, this is kind of an interesting idea.
But it's a great point, though. If it's if they lost $500 million in revenue, their stock price, in my limited knowledge of the stock market, is going to drop significantly.
It wasn't low enough for me. I looked at the charts and it had dropped. I mean, the 6-month high was like $86 a share, and the 6-month low was like 46, and it was trading at 63 this afternoon at like 3 p.m.
Maybe they curbed it and predicted that it was going to drop. I think isn't the whole thing with the stock market
they must have put out guidance. Earlier,
guidance
to tell shareholders, look, we're not broke.
Right.
We're still making money, and we're going to make more money in the future.
We're seeing a dip in revenue. It's significant, but we expected it. Right.
Things are, kind of uncertain at the moment, but don't worry. Everything's going to be okay. And I would guess they put out some guidance.
They've got a stronger card than that to play, Doug. You know that effort. I've forgotten the exact name. It's about making electronics in America. They got a huge chunk of money to build a new chip making plant in the Treasure Valley here. They're spending several billion on a new facility.
It may be a soft buy. I mean, I was looking at it and I didn't feel great about the stock price. It was right in the middle of their range from the last year, but they made an awfully good point.
Don't let me change your investment decision. I'm just saying they got stuff going on, which is great because they're one of the bigger employers in this area.
No, I mean, I don't think they're in any trouble at all. I just thought it was an interesting story because we had a bunch of AI stories listed here, and I was like, so that sort of tied into it, and I was like, that's a big company. I agree. I think they have a future, and I think they're right. AI is going to develop. I think they're going to make a bunch of chips in the United States, and so it may well be a good investment for somebody at this point. I say I kept my $100 to myself.
A podcast-worthy story about something in the Treasure Valley aside from PlexTrack. Because you know PlexTrack's in my backyard.
We do, yes.
Too, right?
We're after 9.
Yes, we should wrap. I didn't have any more stories to cover.
No, I think that was about the last one. That was about as far afield as we got.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul Security Weekly. We'll see you next time. Over and out.